I think that having the view that at the end of your life is going to mean something, there's somewhere to go, there's going to be a judgment made, that's important.
The more I've been thinking about it as well, there's something about just what we've learned from this pandemic time, about learning to not be thrown by some of the troubles that come our way.
People talk about physically prepping for when the world's going to end, or you might read your Bible and try and read into it, but actually getting yourself emotionally ready is something totally different.
But how do you get emotionally ready then for something like that, or even like a pandemic? What do we do?
Even just the simple things of mindfulness, finding a life balance, understanding that there is trouble as well as good things that I've got to overcome.
The book of Revelation is the last book in the Bible, and it's the climax of the message concerning the end times. It is gloriously dramatic, but also sometimes difficult to understand. Some say that Revelation claims to uncover hidden truths of God's sovereign control of the future and how he will overcome the forces of evil. The Forerunner Cry explains that there are different ways of interpreting these visions. Some think it is a wonderful allegory, others see it written just for an ancient time. But more and more people think that these visions in Revelation describe future events and are hugely relevant for today. Author Will Porter says, when you read the book, you will see the majesty of God, the beauty of future eternity, and the victory of good and love over evil. Will adds that if God has given these glimpses into the end times in eternity, it's for our benefit to learn and understand it today. The main body of the book of Revelation depicts heavenly visions of dramatic conflicts on earth in the last days. There are 5 sections of drama interspersed with 5 interludes, where God gives the writer John expanded explanations about the drama he is witnessing in the visions. By grappling with these themes, we can see a future timeline of the end time events. It will help us make sense of the symbolic language of dragons and beasts, of scrolls being eaten and trumpets blown. In the Forerunner Cry, Will says, Revelation gives us insight into how with God by our side, we can stand against the Antichrist and the world's systems. And that ultimately we see the overarching image of the triumph of Jesus, the central figure of human history and the world's coming saviour. He asserts that we have a great treasure in this last book of the Bible and encourages us to open our hearts and search for an understanding of what is to come and adjust our lives to these truths.
So the book of Revelation in the Bible talks most about the end times, and it has some very vivid visions. Would you say they are relevant for today?
I'd say they're very relevant. I have to say, if someone told me they didn't like to read the book of Revelation and they gave me £1 every time they said that, I'd be really rich right now. Because so many people say it's a difficult book to understand, but I think it's a fascinating book. Someone encouraged me once to try and read the book of Revelation once a week for a few weeks, just to kind of get it into my mind and my heart. And from being an obscure book, it became something that I found was really exciting to read. There's a few visions in the book of Revelation, obviously. So if I say what they are, then we can just chat about how relevant we feel it is. So the 6 main visions. There's a vision of Jesus that the Apostle John, one of Jesus' closest friends, he gets a vision of Jesus to start with, Jesus risen in glory and just as a king in heaven. And then there's visions of heaven itself, of the throne room of God, of angels and worship and amazing colour and vibrancy. Then there's the whole sequence of visions around end time trouble and judgments, and around 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. Then there's a vision of evil and how a person of evil and a system of evil is trying to destroy the world. And then there's a 5th vision about how a heavenly ruler comes, which we say is Jesus, comes to defeat that evil. There's a final vision about heaven and the future and a new heaven and new earth. So those 6 kind of core visions really interspersed with other things. So they're really, really vivid. But question, how relevant are they? If you've never read Revelation, you might think, I'll take them or leave them. But what do we think? How have we found when we thought about Revelation?
I think it's quite amazing because I think, we're very familiar with Jesus died on a cross. You often see, crosses and people have necklaces and things. So we get that part, or we know, okay, Jesus was born, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Easter, so we get that. But actually, some of those visions that John is sort of trying to put into words really is, well, but he's also risen again, and he's now in heaven. Like, he's not a baby, he's not weak on a cross, he's actually like, funny and difficult to describe, but he's there full of light, he's out of this world, but in an amazing way. I find it quite amazing to see Jesus in that way too. And, so praying or talking to Jesus, does that change that then if I see Jesus like that? So it's been inspiring to me, I think, to think about it.
I think you also have to take it that unless you read it a few times over, I think you won't necessarily understand it, and it can just be reading about a vision and you don't really take it on board unless you're willing to spend the time reading it, praying about it, and asking other people those questions about it. And I think what's been really good about discussing all of this is that you learn stuff that you would never even have thought to have tried to learn about it all. So I think when it comes to those visions, I think I'm only going to understand the relevance of them today by continuing to read them and really investing some time in seeing how they become relevant in my situation. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so the book of Revelation, a lot of people say it's really difficult to read. What's the easiest way to read it and understand it?
Well, I think you could read it on the level of a simple story. So it's a story with almost like mythic proportions and with some general truths of God defeating evil. And you can read it simply on that level and still get a lot out of it. But more and more people, it seems to me, are starting to read it as though it's a book that has future relevance. And it's not just modern Christians. The early Christians, when they read it, they were looking to the future, what God would do. And in fact, the Apostle John, when he was given these visions, was told he was given them because these things will take place in the future. So it wasn't just like a story, John, I'm giving you this as a vivid dream. It's, John, I'm giving you this to help people on earth prepare for one day in the future. You could read many commentators and many people have written about the book of Revelation, but I've given in the book I've written 5 dramas in this book. And there's a sequence of dramas that you can follow through and that follow this Antichrist and this evil and trouble, and that then follow Jesus' defeat of that, and then new heaven and new earth. And then in between them, there's little sections in which angels are explaining along the way, this is what this means, this is what this means. And things that would really help us to understand about how God protects us in times of trouble, about how God directs the church when we're facing difficulty and persecution, how there is a cosmic battle and how we understand that conflict. Angels talking about the seduction of the world system and not to be drawn into it, and then a vision of victory. So there's all these little explanations, interludes, that I think kind of flesh out the story. So you can read it on that simple level. You can read it as a future, this is what I believe is going to happen, and therefore, Lord, help us to prepare for that day. So you can get value out of any way of reading it. I think it's good to read it. But how have we approached reading the book of Revelation or looking into it a little bit?
I think for me, it's changed over time. So when I first read it, I completely didn't understand any of it whatsoever. I think the only thing I knew about it was, as you said, it is something that's going to happen in the future. But I was utterly confused by any of the visions of beasts and stuff like that, because it all just seems like, I don't know, so symbolic. But like reading it using the framework that you set out in your book of like 5 dramas, 5 interludes, it makes so much more sense reading it. I think that's a really helpful way to read it, and it makes it seem like this is actually, like, rather than being random, like, symbols and stuff, instead it's actually a message from God to us that makes sense and is coherent.
Yeah, and I think for me, I personally haven't given enough attention to that book yet. I kind of try and put it off and think, oh, I don't want to read it. I'm a little bit daunted by it. It's a bit scary, a little bit, like, as I was kind of saying in previous sessions, like, I don't always want to think about it. But I think the way in your book it is structured out is definitely really helpful, and to have it into the kind of different themes and stuff really will help with reading it in more detail and kind of piecing it together a bit.
What would you say is the main message of the Book of Revelation?
There's a few, aren't there? And if we were to ask, we might all think there's a main message to take out of it. So I'll give 3, not just in terms of a timeline of what's going to happen in the tribulation and after that, but I think there's 3 big picture messages we get. One is about God's majesty. So we see something of God who is not an absent creator, not a grandfather of the universe that doesn't care less, but he's actively involved on his throne, overseeing history. So we see something of God's majesty. That's a clear theme that comes through. Then we see something of eternity, I think. So we get a bigger picture. Life is not just our 70, 80 years here. There's something going on of a cosmic story in the universe and eternity. So my life here might contribute to something much bigger in eternity. And then I think we also get to see something about victory, and that's a definite message. So Jesus conquers sin and evil, and death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire in the end. So there's nothing left but heaven and glory and God and his family. So we get that sense of victory, which I think is, those things should really encourage us. So whoever reads the Book of Revelation, majesty, eternity, and victory clearly come through, I think. But there are many other things that come through as well. So I don't know what pick up on one of those if you might want to, or any other thing that you felt Revelation brings home to you.
I would just say Jesus wins. If you were to ask me to summarise it in very short,
He wins.
Jesus wins. That's how I would explain it if you've never heard it before. That's what it means. Now go read it and you'll find out like how and why. But yeah, Jesus wins.
I think also adding to that, definitely supporting that point. But also Jesus wins and he wants you to be on his side. You know, it's that, and there's still time for you to choose him. You know, I mean, the world might be in difficult times, but actually there's still time for you to be like, right, what decision am I going to make? And he really wants you to be with him. So for me, that's sort of that message too. Is like, you know, it's still time to get on the right side, I guess.
So should we take it seriously?
I think we should take the Book of Revelation very seriously. I think some people go overboard and like just start to read that part and then forget the rest of the Bible. And I think we need to take the whole of the Christian faith seriously. But this part of the future story, it's good for reading whatever generation you're living in as a Christian. But the closer you get to Jesus' return, the more relevance it's going to have, I think. And I think that the last generation alive in the tribulation times when Jesus comes will see more relevance in Revelation than anybody else. There's something, I think, that when we see Jesus call to the church in one of the parts of Revelation, he speaks to 7 kinds of churches and 7 kinds of Christians, and each one he calls them to overcome. And he says the same thing to each church. The one who overcomes, I will give this reward. The one who overcomes this, I will give this reward. So Jesus is obviously concerned that people of faith understand this book and do more than just survive troubled times, but overcome and become victorious or full of hope. So I'm trying to take it seriously. And I ask myself the question, do we trust that God would give one of Jesus' closest friends a profound vision 20 centuries ago in time that would go in the Bible so people that needed to hear it would hear it? So it's almost like God must have had a plan to give John that message. So years down the line, people would read it and take to heart, and particularly the last few years before Jesus returned, they would find it so relevant. So I'm trying to take it seriously.
I want to take it seriously, but I know there's a lot of work to do on my part, reading it and understanding it and discussing it even further. And I think it's going to be a long time before I'm like, yeah, I'm totally invested in this. I totally know what's going on. I'm really on board. I'm on board with the whole Jesus wins thing, but I haven't quite got to grips with the understanding of all the bits in between that. And those are the bits I need to understand to know why that takes place and why that is so important and incredible.
I think also they're really important. I don't think we have to understand everything, because I mean, in a sense, we never will, like, I want to understand all the details and things, but I found that reading it gives you that sense of like, okay, like my life actually matters, and the decision I make and matters. In previous sessions we've talked about, we're going to stand before God one day, and I want to be able to be like, I've given everything, and I've been like walking with you, I've been telling people about you, sort of, and it makes me live differently. So I do want to take it seriously, but it doesn't mean I understand it all. But it gives you, even if you don't have all the information in your head, but it gives you that sense of like, right, whatever's happening, I'm safe with him. I'm going to be okay. As you're saying, like, Jesus is going to win, and everything I do matters today. I like to think it is sometimes a bit like, it's like a painting. Someone was like, yeah, that sense of, I saw this picture of the lake or whatever, and he's trying to paint this, a bit abstract, and you wouldn't understand all the techniques or why he did certain things, but when you look at the picture, you sort of get a sense of, well, this is beautiful. And we can know Jesus, we can know the author or the painter of that painting. So I might not get it all, but I get a sense, and I'm like, this is good.
I think no matter what sort of level you get from it, it's always got value. So even if all you've got from it is a simple Jesus wins, there's still so much value in just knowing that. So I think it's definitely just worth looking into Revelation, just because even the simplest stuff you can find in it is so valuable.
So it is one of the books of the Bible that I struggle to read. I haven't read it all the way through yet.
It's just such a completely different style of writing to anything like a book we'd read now.
The beginning is quite nice, I get that. The end is quite nice, I get that, everything will be fine. But it's the middle bit that's sort of a bit confusing. But I think today really helped me to sort of have a look at it and sort of see things make sense a bit more.
I mean, it's challenged me to really hunker down, read it and get into it, because actually it's full of really exciting stuff and really encouraging things, and we just see it as mythical creatures and all this bad stuff that happens, and it's not, and it's this incredible message from God to us about what he wants for us.
I think I've realised that I don't have to understand everything, but I can still get a sense of what it's about. So I might not get all the pictures and the symbols, but I understand that God is with me, that I can have hope.
This discussion has inspired me to read it more and more. Its name is The Revelation of Jesus Christ, and you get to know Jesus through reading it, so yeah.
I'm here at my home, and as I walk into my little study room, I do what I do every time I come in. I switch on the light. Of course, we do it dozens of times in our homes every day. We don't give a moment's thought how complicated the first electric light bulb was to invent. And here I am with a copy of the first incandescent light bulb just next to me. And as I switch it on, we see a picture of the man who invented it, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was a famous American inventor who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century. He had 1,093 patents to his name, constantly thinking of new discoveries. He was famously known for inventing the phonograph, the early motion picture, and of course the first incandescent light bulb. Edison said it took him 1,000 attempts to get it right. 1,000 steps of failure that put him on the path to create that first light bulb that became famous around the world and started a lighting revolution. Well, when I think of him, I think it's a great lesson for those of us who find ourselves living amongst end-time events that were spoken of in the Bible. I believe that God hasn't hidden the future. He has revealed what will happen in future years, and particularly the closing years before Jesus returns. In the Bible, he says what world events will be like and how we should live our lives in the light of that. I believe that those of us who find ourselves caught up with an end-time awareness, like Thomas Edison, need to have a spirit of discovery and revelation. With those who need to keep digging into God's word about what he says about the future, listen to him carefully about what world events are unfolding around us, where our ultimate hope lies, how to point people to a place of faith and safety. May we, like Thomas Edison, have a spirit of discovery and revelation.